My dad raised his glass and said, "To Samantha, she's destined to shine." Everyone cheered. Then he dangled car keys in front of her, the brand new red car parked outside, flashing like it was her crown. When my turn came, I was handed a small box. I opened it. Inside were sponges, dish soap paper towels. Mom smiled sweetly. "Now you can keep the house tidy, Anna." My sister laughed so hard the room shook, and that was the moment I realized I wasn't family. I was the maid. So I stood up and walked out. Hi everyone, I'm Anna in this story. Before I take you back to that night, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit that like button. It lets me know I'm not alone in this. Don't forget to subscribe because this story only gets more intense and you won't want to miss what happens next. It wasn't always like this. At least that's what I used to tell myself late at night when I couldn't sleep, when the echoes of my parents' laughter drifted down the hallway to the room where I lay awake, invisible. I wanted to believe there was a time they saw me, a time I wasn't just the background noise in Samantha's story. But looking back, I think I was always destined to be the shadow. I can still picture Saturday mornings when I was a kid. The smell of bacon and pancakes should have meant family breakfasts, but in our house, it meant work. Dad liked his coffee exactly at 7:05, not a minute earlier, not a minute later. Mom wanted the floors scrubbed before she returned from errands. And Samantha, well, Samantha was allowed to sleep in. I'd be on my knees scrubbing tiles, my small hands raw and stinging from the bleach water while her laughter floated down from her room upstairs. She'd be on the phone with friends planning shopping trips while I crawled across the kitchen floor sponge in hand. No one told me to do it, not in so many words, but the expectation was always there. "Anna's the responsible one," Mom would say, her voice dripping with pride in front of neighbors. At 12 years old, being called responsible felt like praise. By 16, it felt like a chain around my neck. I remember one night when Dad came home from work, his tie loose, his voice already slurred from the bar. Samantha had gotten a B on a math test, and he still lifted her onto his lap like she was some kind of prodigy. "You're going places, Sam," he said, kissing the top of her head. I had an A taped to the fridge. No one noticed. No one ever did. The little things piled up like layers of dust in the corners of a house no one cares to sweep. My hands cracked from washing dishes after Mom's dinner parties. My knees bruised from kneeling to scrub mud out of the carpet after Dad tracked it in. My eyes burned from late-night studying, squeezed between endless chores. And yet when report cards came, Samantha's half-decent grades earned her ice cream outings. My straight A's barely a nod. It was always her. On my 17th birthday, I came home from my part-time job at the diner and found the kitchen filled with balloons and cake. For Samantha. Not because it was her birthday, but because she had finally passed her driving test on the third try. Mom kissed her cheeks, Dad posed for pictures, and relatives clapped like she'd been crowned queen. I stood in the doorway, greasy uniform clinging to me, holding a cheap cupcake I'd bought myself on the way home. No one even noticed I was there. Later that night, Samantha found me sitting on the porch steps. She grinned, still high from all the attention. "Don't pout, Anna. Some of us are just meant to shine brighter." Her words sank into me like a blade. Some of us are just meant to shine brighter. From then on, I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped expecting recognition. I told myself that maybe my role in the family was to hold it together silently, to keep everything clean and running while they shone. Maybe one day they'd appreciate me, but appreciation never came. By the time Samantha's graduation rolled around, I had years of practice hiding my disappointment behind a tight smile. I knew the party would be all about her. I told myself I'd survive it like I survived every other slight. Still, some small part of me, the desperate childlike part, hoped for a crumb of acknowledgement. A glance, a word, anything to show I mattered. That hope was foolish. When I walked into the living room that day, balloons in Samantha's favorite colors lined the walls, pink and silver, never mind that mine had always been green. A massive banner screamed, "Congratulations, Samantha." Her cap and gown were draped perfectly across her chair, like even furniture bowed down to her. The air smelled like vanilla cake and new beginnings, but to me, it just smelled like exclusion. I hovered at the edges of the crowd clapping when everyone else clapped, smiling when I was supposed to. My cheeks hurt from pretending. My chest ached with the weight of invisibility. Mom bustled around like an actress in a play, straightening streamers, fussing over Samantha's hair. Dad bragged loudly about her college prospects, his voice booming so everyone would hear. My name was never spoken. I watched them and wondered had I really fooled myself all these years into thinking I belonged. A memory flickered in my mind, a cracked photo frame that used to sit on the hallway table. A family portrait from years ago. Dad in the middle, Mom on his left, Samantha in front grinning like she owned the world, and me tucked into the corner half cut off by the frame's jagged edge after it broke. No one replaced the frame. No one replaced the picture. For years, I passed by it daily, my face literally cropped out of my own family's story. That's who I was, the cropped-out daughter, the background, the maid. And sitting in that crowded living room with champagne glasses clinking and camera flashes exploding, I knew deep down nothing was going to change. Not unless I changed it myself. The sound of clinking glasses still echoed in my ears as Dad stood tall in the middle of the room, chest puffed out, champagne in hand. His voice carried like a sermon. To Samantha, she's going to do great things. She's destined to shine bright. The crowd roared with cheers, the kind that shake walls and rattle picture frames. I clapped along too, though the sound of my palms meeting felt hollow like applause meant for a ghost. I stood there, a shadow applauding a star. When the gifts began, my stomach knotted. I told myself not to expect anything, that survival in this family meant lowering your hopes until they scraped the floor. But still, that stubborn spark inside me, the one that hadn't been fully extinguished yet, whispered, maybe this time they'll surprise you. Maybe they'll see you. Dad had already spilled Samantha's surprise weeks before his pride couldn't keep secrets. Everyone knew about the car. They just didn't know it would be red-polished like a ruby parked outside under a bow big enough to cover its windshield. He dangled the keys in front of her now, milking the moment. "You deserve this, Sam," he said, handing them over like a king passing down a crown. Her squeal pierced through the air, sharp and triumphant. She bolted out the door, the crowd surging after her. Through the window, I saw her leap into the driver's seat, her cap bobbing with every bounce, while flashes from phones lit up the night. Dad posed with her, his arm around her shoulders, pride radiating off him like heat. Mom wiped tears away, mascara smudging the picture of a mother overcome with joy. And me, I stayed back. I couldn't bring myself to run outside to fight for a place in a celebration that was never mine. I lingered in the doorway, my hands pressed together so tightly my knuckles went white. Then Mom turned her eyes bright as she reached for the small box on the table. "Your turn, Anna," she said. The air stilled around me. My throat tightened. The box was too light, feather-light, insubstantial. My heart began to pound, warning me of the humiliation I already sensed was coming. Still, I forced my fingers to peel back the wrapping paper, each rip sounding louder than it should have, echoing in my head. Inside, stacked neatly like a cruel punchline, were sponges, paper towels, dish soap, even glass cleaner. I stared, blinking, as though maybe if I just looked long enough the supplies would transform into something else. A necklace, a book, anything but what it was, a chore list disguised as a gift. Mom's smile spread wide, syrupy sweet. "Now you can keep the house tidy, Anna. We know how responsible you are." Samantha's laughter erupted before I could even process the words, a sharp, piercing sound that sliced through me. "Perfect for you," she sneered, her eyes sparkling with mockery. Heat rushed to my face. My hands trembled as Dad chuckled, adding the final dagger. "Well, at least you'll always be useful around here." Useful. That was all I was to them. Not loved, not celebrated, just useful. The room blurred around me. The chatter, the clinking glasses, the laughter, they all melted into a dull roar. I looked down at the box, at the sponges and bottles and rolls of paper towels, and something inside me cracked. I closed the box slowly, my hands shaking so badly I thought it might slip from my grasp. A laugh bubbled up inside me, bitter and broken, but I swallowed it back. My heart hammered against my ribs, my lungs tight as though the air itself had turned solid. Mom leaned closer, her voice still honeyed. "Well, aren't you going to say thank you?" The word thank you stuck in my throat like glass shards. Instead, I set the box down on the coffee table carefully, almost reverently, as if it were fragile. But it wasn't the box I was protecting, it was myself. If I stayed a second longer, I would shatter in front of them all. I pushed myself to my feet. "Where are you going?" Anna, Mom asked, her tone dripping with false concern. "Out!" I muttered, my voice low, sharper than I'd ever let it be in her presence. Dad frowned annoyance cutting across his face. "Don't be ungrateful. It's a practical gift. You should appreciate it." Ungrateful. That word ignited something deep inside me. Years of labor, years of silence, years of swallowing every slight, and now when they handed me humiliation wrapped in shiny paper, I was the ungrateful one. My throat burned with the scream I didn't let out. Instead, I grabbed my bag from the hallway, shoving in the essentials I'd tucked there earlier, almost as if some part of me had known I'd need it. Behind me, whispers rippled through the relatives. Samantha snickered loud enough to sting. Wow, can't even take a joke. A joke. That's what my life had been to them. One long, cruel joke at my expense. Anna Mom's voice sharpened now the sugar gone. "You're overreacting. Sit down and stop making a scene." I froze at the doorway, my hand pressed against the cold metal of the knob. For one split second, I almost obeyed. Almost fell back into the cycle of swallowing, of staying small. But then I saw Samantha's reflection in the window, her smug grin, the way she twirled her new car keys in her hand like they were the crown jewels. That was it. "I'm done." I said, my voice steady in a way it had never been before. And with that, I turned the knob and stepped out into the cool night air. The muffled sounds of the party followed me, laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of a celebration I was never meant to belong to. My feet carried me down the driveway faster with every step, my pulse racing like I'd just broken out of a cage. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. All I knew was that staying meant suffocating. Leaving, even if it meant walking into uncertainty, was the only way to breathe again. I walked until my legs ached, until the adrenaline drained out of me and left me trembling under the dim streetlights. My phone buzzed in my pocket calls, texts, but I shoved it deeper. I didn't want their voices in my ears. Not anymore. Finally, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the one person I knew would understand. "Mark." He answered on the second ring. "Anna, are you okay?" His voice was sharp with concern. My throat tightened. "Can I come over?" Of course. Doors unlocked. By the time I reached his apartment, my shoulders had slumped with exhaustion. He opened the door before I could knock. The sight of his steady eyes, his worried frown, was enough to break the dam inside me. I dropped my bag on the floor and collapsed onto his couch. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands shook as I tried to gather words that wouldn't come. Finally, I whispered, "They gave her a car. A brand new car. And me, cleaning supplies." Mark's jaw tightened, his silence heavy with anger. "You're kidding," he said flatly. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "I wish I was." Mom smiled like it was thoughtful. Dad told me I should be grateful. Samantha laughed in my face. My voice cracked. I couldn't stay there. Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on mine. "Anna, you've carried that family for years, cooking, cleaning, holding everything together, and they hand you a box of sponges. You don't deserve that. You've never deserved that." His words hit me harder than the humiliation itself, because they were true. Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and unrelenting. I don't know what to do. They've always expected me to take it, to stay quiet. And I have. But tonight, I couldn't anymore. "Then don't," Mark said firmly. "Don't go back. You don't owe them your life, Anna. You don't owe them anything." His certainty felt like a lifeline. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a life beyond that house. A life where I wasn't the maid, the shadow, the joke. a life that belonged only to me. And as terrifying as it was, that flicker of hope was enough. That night, curled up on Mark's couch, my cheeks damp with tears, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going back, not this time, not ever. The morning after Samantha's graduation, sunlight streamed through Mark's blinds. I sat at his small kitchen table, clutching the coffee mug he'd pressed into my hands. It felt strange, alien almost, to wake up without someone yelling my name from down the hallway. No, Anna, where's my shirt? No, Anna, the floor's dirty again. Just silence. But with the silence came the question that clawed at me. Now what? I stared at my phone. Missed calls, unread messages, Mom, Dad, Samantha. I didn't open a single one. My thumb hovered over the notifications, but the memory of last night, the car keys, the sponges, the laughter kept me steady. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed 3 words into the search bar jobs near me. The listings weren't glamorous. Cashier, receptionist, waitress. Nothing that would make anyone proud at a family party. But I wasn't looking for pride. I was looking for freedom. By the end of the week, I landed a part-time job at a small bookstore downtown. The owner, Mrs. Reynolds, was kind but brisk, the type of woman who noticed if a shelf was even slightly crooked. "You're quick with details," she said after my first shift, as if she could see the years of invisible labor written in the way I straightened spines and dusted corners. For once, my perfectionism wasn't a joke, it was a skill. The paycheck wasn't much. But when I held that thin slip of paper, my chest swelled with pride. It was mine. Not pocket money begrudgingly handed over after errands, not allowance tied to chores. Mine. I used it to put down a deposit on a tiny studio apartment. The place was old with peeling paint and a faucet that dripped unless I twisted it just right. But when I unlocked the door for the first time, the key cold and solid in my hand, I felt something stir inside me. Independence. That first night, I sat cross-legged on the bare floor with Take Out My bag beside me and nothing else. No furniture, no decorations, just me. And yet, I felt richer than I ever had in my parents' house. Of course, survival wasn't easy. Rent devoured most of my paycheck. Groceries were a delicate balancing act. To make ends meet, I started cleaning apartments on weekends. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was still scrubbing floors, still washing other people's dishes. But this time, it was on my terms. Every dollar went into my account, into my future, not into someone else's comfort. Some nights, I collapsed onto the mattress I dragged into the corner, my muscles aching, my hands raw. Doubt crept in like a shadow. What if I can't do this? What if I made a mistake? But then, like a cruel slideshow, I'd remember Samantha's smirk as she jingled her car keys, the sound of her laughter when I unwrapped those sponges. And suddenly, exhaustion didn't matter. Pride burned hotter than pain. Slowly, my account balance grew. Not much, but enough. Enough to buy a second-hand couch. Enough to cover groceries without panicking at every swipe of my card. Enough to breathe without fear. With each small step, I felt it freedom. It didn't roar, it whispered steady and sure like a stream carving stone. One evening, as I was balancing receipts at the bookstore counter, Mark stopped by. He leaned against the register, his eyes scanning me with something between amusement and pride. "You look different," he said. Different how I asked, tucking a receipt into the drawer. Like you finally know what it feels like to own your life. I blinked, then smiled a real smile, unforced. Maybe I do. At first, the silence from my family was a blessing. No orders, no guilt trips, no one reminding me of how useful I was. I let the quiet wash over me, filling in spaces I didn't know had been hollow. For the first time, my life felt like mine. But silence never lasts. The first message came from Mom. "Hi, Anna. How's your new place? I hope you're eating well. We miss you here." I stared at it, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Miss me. Where was this concern when I spent years holding the household together? Still against my better judgment, I replied, "I'm fine. Busy with work. Short, neutral." A few days later, another text. "Your dad and I are so proud of you. We knew you'd land on your feet. We're here for you always." Proud. The word nearly made me laugh out loud. These were the same people who had wrapped up dish soap and sponges, presenting humiliation like a prize. And now they were proud I didn't buy it. Then came Samantha. "Hey sis, hope you're good. Things are kinda crazy here. How's work going?" Her attempt at casual was almost comical. Samantha had never cared about my life, never once asked about my day, unless it affected hers. I typed back a vague, polite answer, the kind of response you give to a coworker, not a sister. And yet, I could feel it, the tide was turning. Their silence wasn't concern. It was calculation. They had lost their maid, and now they wanted me back. The quiet I'd built for myself didn't shatter all at once. It frayed thread by thread with every buzz of my phone. At first, the messages wore a polite mask. "How's your place? Proud of you. We miss you." I read them with the same numb caution you use to handle a knife someone swears isn't sharp. Then the mask slipped. "The car payment is heavier than we planned. Groceries are outrageous right now. Could you spot us just until things settle?" I stared at the screen until the words blurred. They didn't want me. They wanted what I could carry. I started leaving the phone on the kitchen counter like a noisy insect trapped in a jar. The vibrations hummed against the laminate, a steady nagging rattle that followed me from the sink to the stove. When I finally answered, it was to Mom's voice, soft in a way that used to make me agree to anything. "Honey, the house feels empty without you. Your father is exhausted. Samantha is overwhelmed with everything. Come for dinner. Let's talk." Talk had always meant fold the sheets and forgive us while you're at it. "I'm working late," I lied, watching the steam rise from my ramen like a fog I could disappear into. She exhaled a wounded sound. "We just need a little help. Just for a while. You're so capable. Capable, responsible, useful, the words they polished and wore like a charm bracelet when they wanted me obedient. I'm building my own life," I said, keeping my voice even. "I won't come back to fix what isn't mine to fix." Silence opened like a trapdoor, and Dad's voice came through, loud, cracked at the edges. They were on speaker. "Of course. You watch your tone, young lady. We made sacrifices for you. A roof, food. Do you know what that costs?" A memory flashed me at 14 barefoot on winter tile scrubbing mud from the entryway as he lectured about respect. My knuckles were numb, but I kept going because dinner wouldn't be served until the floor shone. "I paid," I said quietly, surprised at my own steadiness. "I paid every day with work you didn't see because you didn't want to." Samantha's voice slid in sugar sweet. "You're being dramatic. Everyone helps in a family. You were never asked to do anything you didn't want." I laughed. It came out dry and sharp. "You think I wanted to be handed dish soap in front of a room full of people?" A beat. Then Dad defensive. It was practical. I pictured the box the way my hands had trembled, trying not to drop humiliation dressed as a gift. "Right," I said. "Practical like giving a maid the tools she needs." Mom bristled. "Don't say that. We love you. Love shouldn't taste like bleach." "You love me when I'm useful," I said. "When I'm quiet. That's not the same thing." Samantha scoffed so loud it clipped through the speaker. "God, Anna, you've always been jealous." "Admit it." "I worked hard. I deserve nice things. You can't stand it." "Jealous." The word slid across my skin like ice. I could see her palm, upturned keys cascading through her fingers as if they were holy. "I don't care about your car," I said. "I care that you laughed when they gave me sponges. I care that you watched me drown and called it a joke." "Watch your mouth," Dad snapped. "You owe us respect. Respect. That old altar. I used to bring offerings, spotless counters, quiet apologies, dinners on time. Respect is earned," I said. "All I got was the reminder that I'm useful. And now that the bills are heavy, suddenly I'm also missed." Mom's voice wobbled. "We're drowning. It would be different if you were here. You're good with money, with lists, with everything. You've always been our anchor. Anchor. The thing that keeps the ship from leaving." My fingers tightened around the phone until I felt the ridge of the case bite my palm. In the crooked light of my studio, the thrift store mirror showed my face tired, yes, but mine. Behind me, a wall of hand-me-down frames held photos of new friends who looked straight into the lens as if I belonged there too. I had never been centered in my parents' house. I refused to return to the frame's edge. "I'm not coming back," I said. "Not to rescue payments you chose not to carry weight you assigned me," Samantha hissed, selfish. A small, startling calm slid through me. Selfish would be demanding someone else live your life for you. Dad tried a new angle, the one that used to cut deepest. "After everything we've done, ungrateful." Ungrateful had once been a leash. Now it was just a tired word rattling an unlocked door. "You told me to be grateful for sponges," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "I am grateful for what that moment taught me." There was a scuffle of sound, like they were all talking at once, then Mom again pleading and brittle. "Please. One dinner. We'll apologize properly. We'll start over." The promise landed too late, a bandage on scar tissue. I thought of how beginnings smelled in their house, pine sol, and panic, the rush to make everything look fine before company. I closed my eyes and pictured something else, me setting my own table, 2 bowls steam, softening the room. Me choosing where to place the cracked photo frame I'd rescued from their hallway and replaced with a whole one my face centered for once. "No," I said, and it felt like setting a heavy box down, muscles finally releasing after years. "We don't need another dinner where I pour coffee and you pour excuses. We need distance." The line went quiet. For a moment I heard only my breath and the mild hum of my ancient fridge. Then Dad, softer than I remembered him capable of. "You'll regret this. Maybe once that would have been true." Now it just sounded like a wish. "I'll risk it," I said, and hung up before the guilt could find my throat. My hands shook, but not from fear, from the sudden slack of released tension. The phone buzzed again, angry this time, the way a doorbell whines when someone leans on it. I set it face down and opened the top drawer where I kept things that marked thresholds, the bookstore name tag, the lease copy, a little envelope I'd addressed to Mom and Dad weeks earlier without knowing if I'd ever use it. Inside lay the spare house key they'd given me at 16 in case I had to let the plumber in case they needed groceries hauled, in case Samantha forgot hers. I slid the key into the envelope, sealed it with my thumb, and pressed along the edge until the glue held. A small private ceremony. I didn't mail it that night. I just left it on the counter where the phone had rattled a silent reply, a boundary you could hold. The studio smelled like dish soap and sleep like the ordinary dignity of a place you clean, because you live there, not because you're proving worth. I turned off the lamp. In the dark, another vibration thudded against the laminate, then stopped. Somewhere between the last ring and the hush that followed, I realized the power struggle had never been about money or chores. It was about authorship, who gets to write my life, who gets to hold the pen. I lay back on the mattress and let that truth settle heavy and kind. In the morning, there would be more calls. Maybe a message from a number I didn't recognize. Maybe words I'd wanted for years arriving late and limping. But for the first time, I knew how to answer without speaking at all. I had the key. And I knew where it belonged. The calls slowed after that night. At first, the silence felt dangerous, like the pause before a storm. I kept my phone face down, checking it only when I had to, half expecting another barrage of demands, another tidal wave of guilt. But days stretched into weeks, and the quiet began to feel safe. I threw myself into work, stacking hours at the bookstore, taking extra cleaning gigs, saving every dollar. My apartment slowly transformed from an echoing box into a place that looked like me, a thrifted couch with a floral pattern, a secondhand lamp that flickered but glowed warmly, pictures of friends pinned to the wall, people who looked straight at me, who wanted me in the frame. It was the first gallery of my life where I wasn't cropped out. But families have a way of circling back like ghosts who refuse to leave a house. One evening, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Anna Dad's voice, but thinner, worn down. I closed my eyes. "We've been talking, your mother and I." He paused as if the words themselves were foreign to him. "We know we messed up. We're sorry. Truly sorry." For a second I couldn't breathe. Sorry. The word I'd prayed for as a child. Sorry for the neglect. Sorry for the humiliation. Sorry for the years of treating me like a servant. And now here it was too late arriving, like an old letter that had been lost in the mail. "We don't want you to think we only care when we need something," he went on. His voice cracked. "We just, we want our family back. We want you back." My throat ached. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to imagine walking through the door and finding warmth instead of cold recognition instead of dismissal. But the memories shouted louder. Samantha laughing as I opened the sponges, Mom's syrupy voice telling me I was responsible enough to scrub forever, Dad's chuckle. "At least you'll always be useful." "I can't," I whispered. My voice was soft, but it didn't waver. "Not now. Maybe not ever." Silence. Then the faint sound of Dad exhaling, broken and small. "I understand. But if you ever change your mind, we'll be here." The line clicked dead. I sat on my couch, the glow of the thrifted lamp casting shadows across my walls. My heart was heavy, but my chest was lighter than it had been in years. I had waited my whole life to hear them say sorry, but when it finally came, it was like pouring water on ashes. Too late to spark anything alive. Months slipped by, each one steadier than the last. My little side hustles grew. Money wasn't plentiful, but it was mine. The ache of guilt still crept in at night, sometimes whispering, "They're still your family. Shouldn't you forgive?" But then I would remember standing in that living room box of sponges in my hands, Samantha's laughter ringing in my ears, and the guilt would quiet. A year later, I found the envelope with the house key still sealed, resting in the drawer where I'd left it. I carried it with me on a walk one evening, the autumn air crisp against my cheeks. At the corner mailbox, I paused. I could have tossed it in, mailed it back to them as a final gesture. Instead, I tore it open, held the cold metal key in my palm, and dropped it into the nearest trash bin. The clang echoed like a closing door. That was my confrontation, not with screaming or slammed doors, but with silence, with choice. For the first time, I wasn't leaving because they pushed me out. I was staying gone because I chose myself. And in that quiet echo, I realized I had finally stepped into my own life. A year passed, and the pieces of my life stitched themselves into something whole. Not perfect, not glamorous, but mine. The bookstore became more than a job. It became a place where I felt seen. Customers recognized me by name. Mrs. Reynolds trusted me to close up on my own, and every stack of novels I arranged felt like building a small corner of stability. My weekends were still filled with extra cleaning shifts, ironic maybe, but I no longer scrubbed to prove my worth. I scrubbed for rent, for groceries, for the second-hand desk I'd bought, and painted emerald green, the color I'd loved as a kid, but never saw in our family's pink and silver world. Every streak I wiped away, every surface I polished was an investment in myself, not a sacrifice to someone else's comfort. The studio transformed slowly. The peeling paint gave way to a fresh coat of cream. I learned how to fix the leaky faucet, fumbling with YouTube tutorials until the drip finally stopped. On the wall above my bed, I hung photos of nights with friends, birthdays, coffee runs, late-night movies. In every picture, I was in the middle of the frame. Not cropped, not hidden, smiling, whole. Sometimes, though, the guilt crept back like a shadow under the door. I'd sit on my thrifted couch, sipping cheap wine, and wonder, was I cruel for walking away? Should I have forgiven them? The word family still had a gravity tugging at me in the quiet. But then the memory would return. Standing in that crowded living room, everyone cheering while Samantha clutched car keys and me holding sponges wrapped like a prize. The laughter, the humiliation, the word useful echoing in my head. That moment was a scar, and scars don't vanish just because someone says, sorry. One evening, Mark came by with pizza. He glanced around my apartment, taking in the lamp glowing warmly, the stack of books by the couch, the little plant thriving on the windowsill. "You've built this all yourself," he said, setting the box on the table. I looked around, too, really looked. The walls didn't just hold up a roof, they held my choices, my freedom, my dignity. "Yeah," I said softly, "I guess I have." He smiled at me, the kind of smile that didn't pity, didn't patronize. Just proud. Feels good, doesn't it? Not being anyone's maid. The words settled deep in my chest. It feels like breathing for the first time. Weeks turned into months. My family reached out here and there, texts that swung between sweetness and scolding. We miss you. Samantha is struggling. She needs you. Don't you think it's time to come home? Sometimes they didn't send words at all, just silence heavy enough to feel like punishment. I never answered. Not because I hated them, but because I finally loved myself enough not to go back. The final time they tried was on Christmas. A message from Mom dinners at 6. It would mean everything if you came. I sat on my couch, the glow of my emerald desk lamp casting shadows across the walls. For a moment, my finger hovered over the reply button. Then I set the phone down. Instead, I lit a candle-poured wine into a chipped mug and called a friend. We laughed, shared stories, filled the evening with warmth that wasn't forced. That was the moment I realized forgiveness isn't always a return. Sometimes forgiveness is walking away and refusing to let the wound reopen. Now when I look back, I see the arc clearly: the girl who scrubbed floors for approval, the sister who swallowed laughter like poison, the daughter handed humiliation wrapped in shiny paper, and the woman who left, the woman who built something out of nothing. I still don't know if forgiveness is in my future. Maybe one day, maybe not. What I do know is this: the night I left with nothing, I gained everything that mattered. I gained myself. If you've ever been treated like the outsider in your own family, you know how heavy that silence feels. Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the only way I could finally breathe. What would you have done in my place? Would you have gone back or closed the door for good? Tell me your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you've ever carried scars from family the way I have, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. Don't forget to subscribe, because more stories like this are coming, and I promise they only get more intense.